Hey everyone, if you have a child like me with PANS, or maybe you suspect your child has PANS, PANDAS, or even suspect they have OCD, this is an important topic that I'm going to cover. We're going to talk about that flare cycle. What happens to kids? Why did they go up and down faster than the roller coaster, the worst roller coaster at Universal or Disney? And it's one of the most common reasons people come to me is they're stuck in a flare cycle that never seems to end. It's, as I always say, like Groundhog Day. So we're going to dive into really just a little bit about PANS, PANDAS, and OCD, but we're going to talk about what fuels flares and what you need to do, how to break that cycle, because it's important. It's important not just for your child, but also for your entire family because it's very stressful, right? And I certainly know. Let's talk about PANS, right? And PANDAS. So, PANS is basically any infection or toxin trigger in that can create a misdirected immune response and all this inflammation, not just neuroinflammation, but body inflammation, and produces a wide variety of psychiatric issues. And PANDAS is specific to strep. I used to see a lot more strep only cases. Now they're as rare as a white tiger. They seem to mostly be PANS cases. And as I always talk about, why? It's because once the immune system breaks down, and really actually once the nervous system starts to dysregulate, everybody wants to come to the party. It's not a good party. It's the one that gets crashed by the cops within 5 minutes. I like to joke about all this because I've lived it with you all. And so once that immune system really is breaking down, it's just so easy for other things to get in there. And that's why PANS is just much more common today. Doesn't mean you don't have PANDAS. I'm just saying I'm not seeing as much. And you know me, people fly in all over the world to work with us one-on-one. And you can do that if you're interested by going to drroseann.com/help and taking our solution matcher. And they come to me because I am just really an unbelievable strategist and help people navigate this icky, awful, horrible condition, PANS and PANDAS, and really make the right decisions. And it starts with a brain map. And that's what I do. But we also have different ways to work with us in a lot of different ways. But that's what people really seek me out. So you already know some of these symptoms, right? So one of the things that I like to talk about, right? So we have OCD, tics, mood swings, behavioral dysregulation, regressive behaviors, and a bunch of other things that are very, very common in PANS and PANDAS, right? But what happens is we often think that it is only absolutely overnight sudden onset. Yes, that happens. That happened to my kid when he was not even he was in his twos, right? And but what more likely happens is sort of these soft signs that are waxing and waning before the full explosion. Or more commonly, since 50% of kids have a physical or mental health problem already, what you can get a little muddied in there and muddled, right? So when we aren't able to actually understand, what are we seeing? Like he was already unfocused and now he can't even like remember anything, like no recall, says hun what every second. So you get confused because something might have already been there. And then there is a sudden acceleration. That is critical. There must be a sudden acceleration in order for it to be PANS and PANDAS. It also can be autoimmune encephalopathy, which can have a very slow waxing and waning without sudden acceleration. And I share this information because so many of you, particularly my YouTubers and on my podcast, they realize these symptoms here. And that's why I do what I do. So you have clarity. Now, I know a lot of you are here because you're like me, we're hardcore, and we know that, we're veterans, we're PANS, PANDAS veterans. And so we're here to really understand what's actually going on. So let's talk about what happens in inflammation and some of the neuropsych symptoms that you see, right? So when inflammation is there, so with PANS and PANDAS, autoimmune encephalopathy, you're getting that misdirected immune response. We're going to talk a little bit about molecular mimicry and inflammation. But when it's there, you can the brain is inflamed and it can't work properly, right? And so you're going to see behaviors, you're going to see dysregulated emotions. You can see those emotions on those understimulated side, like withdrawn, anxiety. And anxiety can be both an under or overstimulated behavior. And on the overstimulated side, you can see rage, you can see lots of irritation. You almost always see executive functioning issues, because for kids that are particularly have been neurotypical, and I definitely have had kids that are like totally neurotypical. I recently worked with somebody that totally normal until they got COVID. And this is not unusual, right? In terms of people that have come to me and then absolutely fell off a cliff, recovered physically, and then got very quick onset of anxiety, which morphed into debilitating depression, and has really been clawing his way out, and improving slowly. They didn't even never had heard of PANS and PANDAS until their mom actually just became friends with me. And I gave some information into a group we're in, and they're like, "What are you talking about? Like, why aren't we talking about how neural inflammation, infections, and toxins can cause all these mental health issues?" Because then, how it goes. When and light bulbs go off. So dysregulation is something that I'm very passionate about. It really is the umbrella to all my work. And dysregulation of the nervous system is actually what fuels flares more than anything that I see. I believe in a 5-pronged approach. Go back and listen to that episode and watch that video. It's an awesome video about how we need to take a multi-pronged approach. And one of the greatest mistakes that people make with PANS, PANDAS, and the OCD component. We're going to talk about some of those. But one of the greatest mistakes is that they only focus on the medical. Okay. I wish, I'm going to pull out my purple special wand today. I wish one medical treatment could do it. Have I ever seen that happen? Yeah. Not always, pretty rare, and often it's very early, right? Many of us don't really make that connection. My max was identified as chronic Lyme. We caught it what we thought was pretty early, but as little as 2 weeks with tick-borne infection can move from early stage to late stage. What does that mean, late stage? It's in the organs. So as things progress, we have layers, not just of the infections causing damage, but the emotional damage, the trauma. There's so many components that happen, more infections and toxins coming in. This is part of what fuels these flares. But the greatest missed opportunity that is my Miss America platform is dysregulation fuels the flares, right? So the more your child dysregulates, the more you dysregulate. We'll talk a little bit about that. The more the flares are going to happen. Okay. And what I want you to know, instead of feeling overwhelmed by that, remember, I've been in your seat. I've been right there with you. And so I know, right? So I walk the walk. I don't just talk the talk. And that's important. And also, I'm not just some, got my degree in the mailbox health coach. I'm actually a licensed professional, who's been doing this for 3 decades and worked with over 10,000 kids. So you have to calm the brain first, and everything else follows. You don't calm the brain. What we know from psychoimmunology is the body is not going to allow any of its resources, that immune system, the neurotransmitter, the hormones, you name it, it's not going to work properly. And so maybe that amazing treatment, whether it's plasmapheresis or IVIG or antibiotics or histamine, whatever it is. Okay. I'm not agnostic. You have to do what's right for your child. What happens is those can't work to optimal levels. Why is it that so many people who fly out to me are literally going to just amazing professionals? I'm not saying that's always, because there's also people who can't find anybody because they're in places where there's just an absence of care. But they're getting great medical treatment, but the dial isn't moving. And this is really tied to those flares, you guys, because flares happen for a lot of reasons. It could be stress at home, it could be stress at school, it could be pushing them, it could be the diet, it could be lack of proper treatment, it could be all of these things. But at the nexus of both, not just the flare, but actual healing, healing is possible. I work with people all the time who literally move on from their PANS. I was speaking at Epidemic Answers conference this weekend. It was awesome. Just so much to say about the moms and dads that were there and the individuals. I literally hugged and held, I don't know how many mothers with tears. And what did I say to them? Your kid's going to get better. And they would be like, oh, because it's scary and the road is murky. And every flare is just like a stab to your heart because you are in panic mode, right? I have been there. I get it. As we start to really, understand, we have to regulate the nervous system, right? And, when the brain is stuck in an inflammation profile, right? It's called molecular mimicry and it affects inflammation. The immune system mistakes brain tissue as an infection and it triggers this inflammation, right? And inflammation happens for a lot of reasons, not just the infection and toxin, but what? Dysregulation of the nervous system. Because once the nervous system is dysregulated, again, that immune system can't work properly, the neurotransmitters, the gut microbiome, and you create this vicious cycle of each feeding it and you get stuck. And so flares, a lot of times, yes, flares can happen when things are going amazing. But ideally, when things are going amazing, you have a micro flare. You're able to go back to your toolkit, right? And I trademark Flare Care Plan, and you're able to use these things and help to go back to baseline. What most people mistake as flares is actually you're just duct taped your leaky boat, and you're going around trying to fix things, right? So when that brain is stuck, right, and in particular to OCD, the inflammation can actually trigger, disrupts the basal ganglia, which then can create OCD behaviors. Now, here's really important for those of you that are OCD parents. I don't believe everybody has PANS. I just want everybody to know, even though I do see it an awful lot, I actually still get people who have OCD. Sometimes it happens. I have 2 people right now. But 80% of my cases have PANS, PANDAS, and OCD. I mean, it just goes together, unfortunately, because of that inflammation and then triggering the basal ganglia. But here's the greatest missed opportunity when it comes to OCD. People think, again, I'm treating it medically, the OCD will go away. That's not the way it works. OCD then it creates a reinforcement, a habit in the brain. Once the habit happens, this behavioral habit, okay, it's its own entity. And many people do awesome treatment, but then they don't see the OCD going away. Now, when we work with people one-on-one in our brain behavior reset program, we calm the nervous system, right? Calm the brain first, everything else follows. Then we go after the behaviors. Now, it's so critical, right? To really, that is the path of what helps to get people better. Again, most people are seeing 7, 8, 9, 10, a dozen people before they come here. They've definitely tried therapy. Actually, every once in a while, I have 2 people right now who OCD, PANS, and they had never tried therapy. Okay. And they actually were asking for help and they were gaslighted. Of course, they were gaslighted, right? But let's talk about breaking this cycle. This is critical. And again, this is what people, when they're working one-on-one, we not only teach you, we walk you through this, right? So number one, you're going to calm that brain. And there are lots of ways to do it. Please go back and listen to those episodes. We have everybody should have magnesium. Check with your provider. We have our calm PMF. We use our neurofeedback. We do a lot of things. And there are many ways to do that. Really important. Number two, you're going to reduce inflammation. There are traditional ways, there are herbals, there's homeopathy. You should be working with a good provider in that, right? So, in here, of course, you're going to strengthen your immune system. That's done with a medical professional. I know we support people in our program with ways, supplements for inflammation, as well as my fourth tip is actually in order to reduce inflammation, you actually have to support the detox pathways, because so many people like me and my kiddos actually have genetic variants that impact detoxification. So you can't, multi-pronged approach, people, right? How do we stop this OCD? How do we stop these flares, right? One of the comments is like accessibility is an issue, and I get it. And if you can imagine this, whoever put this, in there, that I've been working with people with tick-borne illness since 97. Things have definitely gotten better, y'all, but they have not gotten to a point of full accessibility. I mean, most of my people, 95% of people who work with me are remote. And so they come out the one time, we send them home with equipment. We only work with 5 or 6 people in a month. And, you just get, it's a concierge setup. And honestly, it's not just the neurofeedback and PMF and the diet and the supplements. It's the strategy, because of the lack of accessibility. And so it's really critical when it comes to actually what you're supposed to be doing in the order of how you're doing it. It makes all the difference. It can not only get you there faster, but it saves you a ton of money, because sometimes many people will say that, they heard me speak, I don't know how many years ago, or they heard another provider speak, and then they finally went to them, because you can't do it yourself in this. I mean, you need a medical person. And there are lots of ways to do this. And once you learn how you're supposed to do this, you can start implementing many of these things on your own. And again, I also believe that, PANDAS can be beaten. I mean, I see it all the time, but you can't let your foot off the gas on the lifestyle components. What I have seen more than anything with tick-borne infection, with, I'm an Epstein-Barr person. Once it gets in there and it becomes, you have to learn how to live with it, right? It's what homeopathy is a lot about. But you can't let your foot off the gas on those lifestyle things. People will say to me, "Oh my gosh, I made such dramatic improvements on your magnesium. And when you told me to add zinc, and, when can I stop?" And I say, "What do you mean, when can you stop?" Like, these are lifestyle components. It doesn't mean, y'all, that you're going to be doing everything all the time, but you're going to find your core pieces that are always there for you. These, nobody should ever have PANDAS and PANDAS. Nobody should ever have OCD. OCD is horrible. It is a hijacker of the brain. Once somebody is an obsessive compulsive component, right, then what happens is you are just feeding the dysregulation. The dysregulation gets fed and fed and fed and fed. That not only is that person's behavior and brain hijacked, but the nervous system and the whole functioning of the physical healing is not going to allow any healing. And I'm screaming this from the rooftop, right? So nobody ever wants these things, but when they're there, we must knock down and move through them in a way that dismantles them. And the flares are an indicator that you are not further along than you think you are. And that dysregulation of the nervous system, absolutely detoxification, which is tied to inflammation, tend to be the top 2 things that everybody who comes to me is not getting proper help with, and moving further along, right? So we want to make sure with OCD and any of these things, you have PTSD, your kid's super anxious, we need behavioral support, right? But when is that opportune time, right? So you might be trying to work with somebody right now, but your kid is so dysregulated, either those understimulated behaviors where they're just totally unfocused. You're questioning, maybe they do actually have seizures, or you're questioning that they are so disconnected, right? And then those extremes on the externalizers, the hyperreactivity, the emotional dysregulation, the anger that just ignites, or the absolute resistance every time you try to get them on the bus. You need behavioral support and how to deal with that. But the first part that's going to allow the executive functioning, that part of your child's brain to actually allow those things to work, is regulating the nervous system. It's just not going to let you. So maybe you could get glimmers of it, but you have to calm it down, right? And again, there's lots of ways to do it. What we do is, I'm just so passionate about neurofeedback, and PEMF, and we create our own device. And, these are tools that I know that work. There are other ways. There are many other ways. I mean, I pray every day. That is a super regulator. I do grounding techniques. And of course, the sixth thing that is super important is co-regulation. If you don't got it together, and again, I know it's hard not to get it together, but if you don't view this as a marathon and not a sprint, because everyone thinks it's a sprint, because we are a magic wand society in America, that we think there's a pill that's going to fix it, and some, IVIG is going to fix it, and all that other stuff. We got to regulate ourselves. That is truly the unlocker of healing. I will have, and you're going to hear me say this all the time, I will have people with the same problem, and I will have, okay, let's pandas, constant flares, and can't get out of the flare cycle. We're better, but we're always destabilizing and going back and destabilizing. Have OCD, okay? Same exact people. I'll have one person where their OCD is so much affected everybody in the family, right? Where maybe it's a level 10. And I'll have a family who's maybe it's a level 7. Now, my level 10 family, if I can get those parents to regulate, or they've already regulated, they're going to have, there is no cap to their success in terms of remediating this problem. I mean, this is just what I see over and over again. Now, as Tony will say, right? If you don't know me, my dad, Tony, saucy little 5'4", former CEO, trauma survivor, thriver, amazing human being, always says it's easy with the mouth. So I know it's hard, but there are ways that we have to regulate ourselves. So I want you to understand that flares, again, they are a flashing red light that you need TLC, and it starts with nervous system dysregulation. And we have to regulate first, then we layer on the different components. It amplifies success of physical treatment, medical treatment, other things like OT and PT. I didn't even mention them. I love them. And then you can do psychological work, right? But that nervous system regulation isn't just your child. It's you too. It's just real hard to do that. Once you start doing this and you really get into the behavioral work, then you can really improve things. So if you're looking for solutions, or you want to get in on our holiday sale, you can go to drroseann.com/help. I hope this was helpful. I'm giving this to you from one PANS mom to another. And I hope this was inspirational and not overwhelming, because that's what I try to do every day. But just take one step towards nervous system regulation. And as always, you got this.